Welcome back to day two of the Connected Teamwork Summit. I'm your co-host Hilko Faber, and actually I'm here today with my colleague Jennifer Winnick. How are you doing today, Jennifer?
I'm doing well, thanks, Helga. How are you?
I am good. I'm very happy to be here, and if you're listening, participating, welcome to this second day of the Connected Teamwork Summit. We are exploring this question of how can we stay connected to what's truly important to us, what's truly important in staying connected to each other and to our purpose. And how do we access those vast amounts of intelligence, potential that are available to us when we allow ourselves to go a little deeper and to connect to the space that even goes beyond our thoughts and feelings, something that we can call presence or awareness or soul or something that goes very deep. And then how do we bring that into our day to day in our work with others, in our teamwork specifically with others? Teamwork is maybe all every moment. We're always in some kind of team setting, whether it's with our partners, our families, our friends, our communities, our people at work. We're always in some kind of team setting. The word team actually comes from family. It's interesting how these things are very connected. I was reflecting on yesterday, and as I was doing my morning workout, and I did my weights, and then I walked outside the garage where my weights are, and I saw the sunrise, and I teared up a little bit. It's like this sunrise is every day, and I wondered what would it be like if I and if all of us could be more like that sunrise in every moment that we show up, whatever happens in that moment, whether things are going well or not well, um, whether we feel happy or whether we feel sad, whether that sense of the bursting of the sunrise can be with us every moment. And to me, nature is such a powerful teacher to connect us to that place which is so much deeper than where our thoughts and feelings regularly like to go. Today, we're going to continue this conversation about how do we build connectedness. Yesterday, we heard from six magnificent speakers about connectedness, and my mind likes to categorize things in like how do you work with connectedness, and those pointers of truth, love, and service keep whirling around in my mind. I was thinking this morning how beautiful it is that our mind is able to make constructs that energize us, that help inspire us, that help us see and be oriented in a certain way. Those three words, truth, love, and service, or you could say three lighthouses in my mind that help me to steer towards connectedness with myself, with others, and with my purpose. There was so much said about love yesterday, with Carson kicking us off yesterday, talking about appreciation and how when we are appreciating of ourselves and each other, we're plugged in with each other. No matter what happens, it doesn't vary. It's invariable. It's unconditional. We heard from Matt Oppenheimer, leading Remitly, about being flooded. I thought it was so fascinating, being flooded and allowing ourselves the space to accept that we're humans that get flooded and acknowledge that authentically with others. To me, such a beautiful moment of practicing love and self compassion. I loved Christine Linde's reflection on how important it is to take good care of self and really take care of this vessel that we are and listen to it and keep balanced. So much was said about that. And then we talked about truth, being present. I heard that throughout all of the conversations. I loved Vignachetti's reflection on how we need to be like the Amazon saplings that don't rush towards the light because then they die, not in a race to the top, but they actually gently anchor themselves with roots and take the time for that. And those are just the saplings that actually survive. I thought it was such a powerful metaphor, thinking about how we put ourselves in service of something that is actually giving us energy. Vignesh also talked about service and how his wife had refound her inner spark with teaching others how to paint, and in the process, finding our own wherewithal with painting. So this powerful pointer of putting ourselves into service. Erwin Visser, our mountaineer, the Mount Everest mountaineer, talking about how when we set ourselves a goal that we really want, the goal itself lifts us out of our limitations. And Jill Myers talking about how when we appoint ourselves a personal board, it provides more truth. Thought that was beautiful in terms of a principle of practicing both truth and compassion, knowing that I don't have it all myself, that compassionate part, and also talking about the willingness to allow more truth in. And I find life is such a humbling adventure. I may share an experience I had last night later when we talk with a second with Jennifer about this. We talked about the first six of the 12 team defining moments. And again, these are to me like beacons that we can sail through as a team. There's easier ones. We call them white belt, just to have a little language marker for that. We talked about appreciation and getting to know each other and goal setting and being in service of something. And then the little harder ones of group reflection and also making decisions. And today we'll continue with some blue belt moments, a little harder ones of like what happens when we manage commitments and how do we stay like the sunrise, like that's deep connection when people don't follow through, or we don't follow through ourselves, or how do we work with feedback and coaching. And then we go to what we call the black belt moments, the harder ones, maybe the hardest ones, like the stormiest weathers, like when we have setbacks, when we are in conflict, when we're hurting, when things are ending or people are leaving. How do we work with that and stay connected and be like the sunrise? I'm looking forward to being in this contemplation with you. And I'm also looking forward to having this conversation now with you, Jennifer. So I suggest we turn the table, and I'll give the floor to you, and you lead us where you want.
Thank you, Hilke. Well, you just shared so many impactful moments from yesterday's speakers, and I expect there will be a lot more, many more keepers today from today's speaker lineup. I'm curious if you could share with us what inspired you to put on this summit. Why this? Why now?
I get some goosebumps when I hear what you're saying. I'm a pretty private person, kind of a monkish person. Like I love being with myself. Actually, I was a bachelor for most of my life. The little couch you see behind me, if you see me on the screen, is where I often sit myself down to meditate. And I also noticed that I love working with people. I've been doing this work, and actually that's how I met you as well, being in these rooms, being these workshop rooms, and kind of happened to me, you could say, or for me, where these words that come through and the communion with others just inspires something that my little being sitting on that couch actually cannot access, or at least not as easily access. So there's something that happens in the good book says here, when more than one is gathered in my name, or when we are gathered together, there's something that unleashes. So there's always been a longing in me for togetherness. And then I look into the world, and for a while in my journey, I was like, well, I've seen part of what is true, this constancy, and so it's all bliss, it's all peace. Why worry about anything? It's like, don't worry, be happy in it. One of my favorite songs. Great movie now coming out about that. But then there's also the truth of tremendous suffering in the world, division, wars, and wars and stuff has been always, but it's like, it's so visceral, breaks my heart, Ukraine, Gaza, and endless others that are not in our news as much, but endless others, climate destruction, polarization in our country. I dread this year of elections in terms of what the risk is in terms of dividing us again. I feel my neighborhood has just recovered from the last elections where the signs were like, no, I'm not talking to that person or that person because they are a what supporter, and now we're neighbors again, and I feel like we're at risk of drifting apart or worse. And so I feel there's a real need in the world for a different kind of intelligence. And what I noticed in workshop rooms is that humans work well with language markers. Now, I learned language markers myself, like, we talked about in our first workshop ever, I think, was about victim player, not blaming, not blaming external circumstances, but taking responsibility. And those words, have stayed with me for my whole life until it's like, that's now probably 15, 20 years ago that I first learned about these. And so I thought maybe it's time to introduce a part of a new vocabulary that is a vocabulary of connectedness rather than divisiveness. So it's not about how I feel or you feel, or whether you're right or whether I'm right, or even whether we find a solution. Because the challenges of today are so big that anybody's going to say like, oh, we're going to solve this tomorrow is not true. So to me, if our core orientation can shift from that to how do we stay connected with ourselves, with the depth of our intelligence, the love, the truth, the service that we are, and then come what may, that sort of unconditional rooting together. That's what I wanted to bring into the world. And I thought, well, if we do a conference about that, then it may be one other signal into the world that there's this possibility.
Yeah. Wow. There was a lot in there. So inspiring. And yes, I remember language. I still think about victim and player all the time. And that was 12 years ago? Something like that. Yeah. So yesterday you talk about language markers, and one of the things that you talked about yesterday, the concepts, was this notion of CQ. So could you share a little bit more about what you see as the pathway to building CQ?
Yeah. So CQ, connectedness quotient, again, deliberately choosing a word that conjures an image for people to relate to. And I think, we have been, somebody years ago talked about IQ, and then EQ came into the world in the 60s. I think it was introduced first, right? And so now I feel I wanted to introduce a different concept, a different kind of intelligence that would not be divisive but uniting. And so I thought, well, let's call it connectedness quotient, which is to me a way to enter that is to first be still. Be still. Be still. In all the spiritual traditions, that is a core principle. Be still. Be still. Not like rigidly still, but be still. Like let the sound noise of our thoughts and feelings just subside for a moment, or maybe for many moments, and see what opens up then. It's like my favorite prayer is the St. Francis prayer. It's in dying that we're born into eternal life. And to me, that's the death of all the attachments to all our thoughts and feelings, that opens up a space that actually is always already here. And so the access point to me is the contemplation stillness. Now, I used to think that there was one way to do this, and it was meditation, because I was trained as a Buddhist. but then, but that's just, another attachment too. There's endless ways. Music can be a way. Walking can be a way.
Mm.
Sitting can be a way. Having a conversation with somebody can be a way. But to me, there's the second, besides stillness, there's this deep orientation towards inquiry. Like asking ourselves, so what is true? What is more true than the thought I'm having right now? That's to me another part of that. And then not making that cold, but practicing love. How can I be more kind, more compassionate? I love what Matt said yesterday about this. Like, can I be more compassionate to myself when I have a flood moment, or somebody else does that? And then and because I'm a human, how do I put that in service in a team? That all of these things to me are like pointers that can get us there, help us get there.
Yeah. What you're saying makes me think about, I think I read recently, or maybe not so recently, you are not your thoughts. Just because you think it doesn't mean it's true, or you don't need to act upon it. And what you're talking about is that space between the thought, and creating space between the thought and the belief or the action. And, I think the irony is we live in a very connected world, sort of quote unquote connected. We all have, these things floating around us all the time. We're constantly connected and yet so disconnected. And you do a lot of work with teams. You talk a lot about the work you do with teams. How do you work with team members who who already believe they're connected, who don't really feel like they need or think they need to do this work?
Well, my first principle is that I am not the holder of truth. Everybody gets to stand in their own two shoes, whatever that means for them. So to me, it's being clear that everybody has the total choice to participate however they want, including not at all. And so Jennifer, actually, when I met you, I was still in the convincing mode.
Advocacy.
Right. I would go after people.
I remember.
And it's not very skillful. That's my fear of like, I might be losing somebody. I might be failing, right? As opposed to, how can I best be of service? And if the basic principle is presence, then to me is, how can I be still and be present and be that what I want others to become? My choice is being that what I want others to become, even though my ideas of what others need to become are totally delusional. Because I'm married for 2 years. I thought I got it all figured out. Relationships teaches me so much. How I am definitely not an expert on others, not even an expert on myself. Like, I feel like I'm continually in kindergarten when it comes to self-knowledge. And I think when it comes to other knowledge, I'm a fetus with some ideas.
Yeah, that reminds me of another concept in addition to victim player that you taught us early on. I think pre-mindset was knower learner. What I heard you say is this journey from a knower masquerading as a learner to a true learner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating to me is I said these words
I know.
to you 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And till today, part of me hasn't quite caught up to what that means.
Yeah.
I think words often have the power to be light years ahead of our own realization. That's where contemplation comes up. It can close the gap between something that we know deep down, but most of us doesn't quite understand or realize or live. That's the difference between like the lived and the espoused culture.
Yeah.
So many teams say, no, we want to be compassionate and respectful and courageous and creative. Heck, yeah, great words.
Mm-hmm.
And then the senior executive walks into the room and everybody falls still. And everybody's like little dogs trying to be nice and perform. And all the wisdom just seems to be cut off in that moment. I'm just making an extreme example, right?
Yeah.
So it's the part of the working with the team is to help people not judge those moments, but first of all, accept that that's happening.
Yeah.
Become aware of it, and then compassionately see if there are other choices that we might want to try out. Not because we should, that goes to the other part of the question, but because we want to. And there's a way to motivate, because a way to motivate for me is to look at the impact, like the Dr. Phil question, how is that working for you?
Yeah.
On the and on the level of ego, it might be like, oh, great, I feel safe. How is that working for you on the level of the I, the we, and the it? I often like to think about those three. Those 3 come from Ken Wilber way back when. He wrote many books, and one of this was called The Theory of Everything. I love that title. Talk about humility. So, like the impact on myself, how is it working on me? How I feel when I clam up. What's the impact on my relationship? For example, with the senior executive when I don't speak up. And how does that work for our effectiveness? Do we bring up to the senior executive how things are actually going? Or are we presenting like the good news? No, that's how companies go out of business. So it's and when people become aware of that's the impact of them optimizing for their smaller version, not best sense of self, is that things actually not working very well. So in that way, life is very compassionate and a great teacher because it always shows us in some way when we're out of alignment. So I usually let life, whatever is happening with the team, the result be the teacher. So my question usually will be, so what's your challenge?
Yeah. Yeah. As you were talking about that transformation you've made from the, advocating, the advocacy of these beliefs, these values, to of truth, love, and service, to embodying them. And you talked about truth, love, and service being lighthouses. And I'm reminded of that Anne Lamott quote of, and there's a lighthouse right behind me, that a mentor of mine painted for me. That lighthouses don't run all over islands looking for boats to save. They just stand there shining.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So thinking about today and thinking about this summit, what's your best hope for what your viewers will take away?
That our participants will sit more deeply into their seat. Not like a couch potato, even though it's nice to do that sometimes, but with that sort of warrior-like energy. Like, ooh, what happens when I truly commit to my own potential, to my best possible relationship with others, and being purposeful, really living my purpose in this world, and finding ways, maybe big ways, small ways, from the speakers that we listened to today, to help being supported in that journey. Like, see the speakers as today as gentle carvers. Like, I love this quote by Michelangelo. And he was asked, how did you make this beautiful statue that was later called David? And he saw, and I said, I saw an angel in the stone and I carved to set it free. So let these speakers be your carvers to free your angel, to free your potential, to connect you more deeply to what is actually true about you. I know that's my intention for myself, and I look forward to doing that together.
Yeah. Yeah. And what would you, beyond the today's summit, what would your best guidance be for people to continue to build their CQ, their connectedness quotient?
To sit with that question. How do I build we live in a world of a lot. Like I want a lot of this and a lot. How do I build a little bit more connection to myself, to others, and to my purpose today? Not tomorrow, today, like in this moment. Things don't have to get better before that happen. I can do that right now. Whether I feel sick, whether I feel healthy, whether I feel euphoric or sad, doesn't matter. How do I build a little bit more connectedness? Maybe it's embracing my difficult feelings. Maybe it's reaching out in a helping way to somebody who needs. Maybe it's putting myself in service of something. Just practice sitting with that question and let the practices just come to you. So thank you for guiding us today, Jennifer. I really appreciated your questions. I'm struck by how powerful questions are. So actually, that's another thing we can do for each other. Ask each other questions for deeper illumination. It's very, very helpful. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. It's been a joy talking to you this morning, Hilke.
Always, Jennifer. Always. Thank you so much. Thank you for being a lighthouse. Being a lighthouse. Thank you for that. So as we are closing our introductory comments for today, that's my invitation to each of you who's listening now or later. Think about what helps you to get more connected to yourself. Not your mini me, but just maybe a little bit bigger. And then maybe another question is, what happens if I expand the concept of me a little bit more to include other parts of me that I might be afraid of and others that I might not want to relate to? What happens with my connectedness when I just open the aperture and do that with soft eyes, a soft heart, an open heart, relaxed stomach, and a firm spine? See you after the break. We're going to see our first speaker of the day, who I'm so looking forward to speaking with, my friend and person I admire as a tremendous lighthouse, John Rex, right after the break to talk about our next team defining moments, which will be about how do we manage commitment with connectedness. See you after the break. And welcome back to the Connected Teamwork Summit. We're going to have a conversation now about managing commitments with a tremendous lighthouse and friend, coach, leader, inspirer of many, John Rex. John, how are you today?
I'm well, Hilke. So good to see you.
Same
Great to
here.
hear your voice and see the sparkle in your eye.
Oh my, takes one to know one. I see the sparkles going back and forth between us. This is great. I'm going to say a bit about you, John, so that viewers that don't know you yet know about you. I think everybody in the world should know about John Rex.
You're very kind.
The Latin translation of your last name, I believe, is King. And I think that's a very apt way to describe you, not as a from an ego perspective, but from a connectedness perspective, somebody who really lives this in many ways. John is a person that has integrated many paths in life, including being a former CFO of Microsoft North America. So he works now as executive coach, where he brings this real world perspective. So he's able to integrate that, I would consider that the school of hard knocks business world, and he supports senior executives on their journeys to be the top leaders they can be, and he does that immensely well. He understands the intensity and the complexity of the business world because he's literally done it himself. He is also a husband and a father of 4 and a grandfather of many more, I believe.
9.
Nine.
As of just a few weeks ago, 9.
9 as of a few weeks ago. And so he knows about that area too. I often see pictures of John and his family, and it's more and more people that are harmoniously together. It's a beautiful picture. I was like, wow, if the whole world could be like John's family, what an amazing place we would live in. And of course, I've never been there, so maybe I'm sure you have issues in your family, but it looks great. And I love the way you're speaking about that. John helps executives scale the ladder, especially in their pressure. He practices emotional intelligence, unconditional responsibility, and a growth mindset, amongst many other things. He's worked worldwide, lived in Latin America for 12 years, and he has a strong personal stake in diversity and inclusion. Key pillars for him are family, spirituality, and community. And I would say I know John as a person who is one of the most grounded, supportive people that I know. And so I'm very grateful to talk with you about managing commitments today.
Pleasure to be here, Hilke. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, wonderful. Very good. So can you tell us, John, a little bit about what you have learned about building connectedness when you manage commitments? Whether people keep them or not. How do you build connectedness? What's your experience in that? Maybe you tell us a story.
Yeah, I was thinking about that before our call today, and something that really comes to mind for me, like something that I've lived several times with multiple teams over the years, is I'll give it just the umbrella title or label of storytelling. And what I mean by that is, think for us humans to really connect with each other, a vital element, catalyst, is storytelling, both like telling my story and hearing your story. And as I think back over my years in corporate America, those moments when the team I was on or the team I was leading, when we were able to tell our stories to each other and to hear each other's stories, and in a way sort of step into each other's world, into each other's lived experience, it just creates connection in a very elegant, magical, sweet kind of way. I've seen it multiple times. And you can bring that about through facilitation. And in fact, I remember you helped one of my teams with storytelling one night. You may or may not remember that.
I do remember.
It was at an offsite, and we had a dinner, and we each told a story about ourselves, maybe something that had really shaped who we had become. And that's a great way to get that conversation going. But I've seen it happen organically many, many times too, where leaders are together maybe at an offsite or maybe traveling together or in some, informal moment where we feel kind of the safety and the freedom to tell our story and to hear others' stories.
Mm.
Now, I think an interesting element of this is like, well, just how vulnerable and honest am I going to be in my storytelling, right? Like, I've been in moments where everybody has an opportunity to tell their story. And of course, everyone gets to choose which story they're going to tell. They also get to choose like how deep in that story they're going to go, how
Right.
much they're going to expose. That's how
Yeah.
agency operates. And yet, my experience is that each time a team does that, even if it's only exposing, like the safe side of what the individual wants to share, there's still some connection that happens. Now, the more vulnerable up to a point, there's like a point where you cross the line, like TMI. I didn't
Right.
I didn't need to
Right.
know everything.
Right.
But when we share our stories, it just humanizes each. It just humanizes, like, oh, I see you, you see me, we're both
Yeah.
humans, and that beautiful connective tissue begins to form. And I think that's kind of the essence of the
Mm.
foundation
Mm.
of
Mm.
what it takes to behave like a team.
Yes. 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 This connectedness through storytelling creates this connective tissue that helps to bring the foundation of a team together. It stitches it together.
Mm.
So tell us about managing commitments in that context. Once that's happened, or maybe that has not happened, maybe you can tell us a little about, like, so what happens when, and when teams, the moment that we're focusing on this conversation is like, what happens when people don't deliver,
Mhm.
or they break their promises, or requests aren't clear? Like, how does that play out, and how do you build or rebuild connectedness in these moments? Can you tell us a bit about that? Like, how does that happen?
Yeah. Before I go straight into answering that question, I just want to rewind slightly and just emphasize like what connectedness enables or what it empowers or what it allows is for honesty
Hmm.
and transparency and vulnerability. And when those things exist, then conversations about commitments uh, are so much easier.
Hmm.
The word lubricated is coming to my mind, but it's just easier. Like
Yeah.
when you're connected, and I guess to a certain degree, that's another way of saying when you trust each other, then
Hmm.
you can have serious conversations about commitment. Let me tell a brief anecdote. I was working for a CEO at one point. I was his CFO, and he had made a request of me to do a particular analysis or something like that. I don't remember the detail, but we agreed on what I was going to do. I went off, started working on it, and while I was working on this analysis, I think it was an analysis. Uh, I had this brilliant ideas like, oh, what we talked about, that's an interesting way of looking at this problem, but I know a better way of looking at this problem. And so I did like this analysis that was different from what he and I had talked about. And then a day or so later, I went back to him and very proudly, laid out my work and talked him through it, and he listened very carefully and so forth. And then he said something that I'll never forget. He said very simply and calmly, John, this is not what we agreed. Meaning the work product that I had delivered, right? This is not what we agreed. It was a very powerful learning for me, and one that I think is at the heart of effective commitments.
Hmm.
And let me explain myself a little bit better. When he said, this is not what we agreed, well, he was right. It was not what we had agreed. I actually thought it was better than what we had agreed, but that was beside the point. Because we had an agreement, that gave him the moral ground to stand on and to point to an objective criteria,
Hmm.
which was what we had agreed or contracted or whatever you want to call it. Like, we two humans had come together, we had reached, this agreement or this plan, and
Mhm.
then I didn't follow through.
Hmm.
I didn't deliver what we had talked about.
Hmm.
And what I love about that story is, like, he couldn't have called me out that way unless we had an agreement. Unless there was a commitment. I've been using the word agreement, but you could just substitute commitment. Like, I have made a commitment. And it's just a good reminder that every commitment has two vital elements. One is an effective request,
Mhm.
and then the other part is an acceptance
Hmm.
of that request.
Hmm.
And I think in the business world, especially, like, we get all full of ourselves, we get really bad at making requests.
Hmm.
We just throw out some kind of vague expectation. Oh, somebody needs to fix this problem, or this is unacceptable, or just some kind of emotional, vague declaration. And we we kind of tell ourselves, well, I've told people to go and fix this, or I've told people they have, and the operative word there is told, like
Hmm.
a directive,
Hmm.
which is not a request. A request implies a response.
Hmm.
And so when a leader wants to garner a commitment, step one is to make an effective request, which is to ask if so-and-so can do XYZ task, and usually within a particular time frame. So being explicit, focusing on those basic elements, it seems like almost elementary school level.
Right.
And yet it's so poorly practiced in the business world. And people are so caught up in this, oh, I always have to show a can-do attitude. I always have to, like, behave as though I can intuit what the boss wants.
Yeah.
And so there's this sort of misfiring that's happening in both directions, right? The leader's throwing out some commentary that they think is a request. The subordinate is, like, kind of trying to interpret what they think it might be, and they want to also show, like, oh, I have a great attitude and I can get stuff done. And so they just say yes to something they don't really understand.
Yeah.
An effective request is clear and specific. Maybe more importantly, an effective request allows the opportunity for the other party to say, I don't understand,
Hmm.
or,
Hmm.
that conflicts with something else you already asked me to do.
Hmm. Hmm.
Or
Yes.
it violates some standard or policy or even the law or something like that, right? So
Hmm.
that opportunity for the other party to say either yes, yeah, I can do it, I understand, no problem, or no, I can't do it, and provide the rationale why, or potentially say, can you give me a day to get back to you on that? Like, I need to go and do my homework so that I can commit.
Hmm.
Because if I'm going to commit, like, I have to follow through. That's
Yes.
right.
It strikes me, John, that making a request and making a promise or not making a promise both require courage from both parties.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
and I want to actually explore that aspect of it a little bit more after the break that we'll take in a few seconds. And I want to ask you after the break, what requests have you found difficult to make? And how did you find the wherewithal to make these requests in a skillful, connecting way? I'll see you after the break.
Sounds good.
So we're speaking with John Rex, former CFO of Microsoft North America and an exemplary executive coach. We talked about courage, commitments, managing promises and requests. And now we're going to look into this question of like, so what gets in the way of making these difficult requests, or what gets in what like I find for myself, John, this is I would give myself on a scale from 1 to 10 probably a 4 in terms of how good I am in making requests.
You're way ahead of me then, Ilka.
Okay, well, maybe I'm an easy grader. Who knows? But tell us about what requests may have been hard for you to make, and what have you been learning about making courageous requests that connect people?
Yeah. I think the requests that require the most courage are the requests around action or some kind of improvement that the individual needs to make.
Hmm.
In other words, some kind of correction to their behavior or the quality of their work, standard of their work, and so forth. And it takes courage because there's always the risk that the individual, if you don't do it skillfully, the individual may feel that you are attacking their character as opposed to helping them correct a behavior. So let's say, for example, I don't know, a sales leader is habitually falling short of hitting their goals or something like that. Okay. They need to make some corrections that have like kind of deeply embedded behavioral implications. Very easy for the receiver to feel like, oh, you're criticizing who I am at my essence, like how I operate as a human, as opposed to you are asking me to make some adjustments to what I do, not who I am. And so that's why I say it takes courage, but it probably takes as much skill to communicate in such a way that the listener, the other party, understands that you have their best interest at heart. You want to help them. You want to help them succeed. And for them to succeed, they're going to have to make some changes, some course corrections, and they may need to do some self-examination, some self-observation when it comes to certain behaviors or lack of behavior.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so that takes courage. It takes courage to step into that place that requires another person to really self-examine and to consider like what kind of changes in self-management do they need to make. What we tend to do is take the easy route. Right? The easy route is, I'll call it the Band-Aid. It's just like make a simple, easy, tactical request that doesn't get at the heart of the issue. Right. I need you to make, 5 more sales calls a week or something like that.
Yes. Yes.
It's not getting at the heart of the issue, which may be, a deeper conversation around
Right.
what do you think is keeping you from reaching your goals? And
Right.
and that may lead down paths that can be uncomfortable for everybody in the conversations,
Yes. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
they're important.
So making requests, and I really appreciate your intentionality behind that for change in behavior, doing that with the best interest of them in your heart and mind. I'm always reminded of this little phrase that you taught me: do what makes you, I think it's pride. No, I don't remember anymore now. Let me see
Yeah,
what it
the
is.
phrase
Something.
is feel peace in your heart and take pride in your actions.
Thank you. Yes. Do what helps you feel peace in your heart and feel pride in your actions. I love that. See, the feeling is still there. It's interesting how words do that. The phrase wasn't quite there. Feel peace in your heart and pride in your actions. So if we translate this to ourselves, because of course the primary person we are with all day long is sitting in these chairs.
Yeah, it's us.
It's us. Oh, darn. It's so nice to be a coach of others, but there we are, coaching ourselves.
Yeah.
So, what requests or promises do you find challenging to make to yourself? What requests or promises do you find challenging to make to yourself, or which ones really inspire you? Or they like, it's time for me to make this request of me, or this promise to myself?
I think what's hardest for me is it's easy, and I might not be the only victim of this. Better said, the only example of this. It's easy to look ourselves into a sense of everything is okay as it is, meaning okay with myself. Like the way I'm behaving, what I'm doing is perfectly fine.
Mhm.
Right? Some kind of homeostasis.
Right. Right.
Yay, I'm fine. And it's easy to ignore feedback that comes through, I'll call it the system. So the humans around us, individually and collectively,
Mm.
as they provide us feedback. And I don't mean like formal, deliberate feedback. I just mean the way that people respond and react to us. If we are not tuned into how our behavior is impacting others, maybe we're not being as inspirational or encouraging, or whatever, right? When we don't pay attention to ourselves,
Mm.
we're on autopilot. When we are in robotic mode, then we're trapped in habit and pattern. And habit and pattern may not necessarily serve us. There are certain habits that serve us very well, like I should stop at red lights. I should brush my teeth. I should shower at least, once a month. These are all habits that serve us and serve us pretty well. But there are a lot of other habits that don't serve us, a lot of other patterns that don't help us or those around us. And so to the degree that we can create some kind of interruption in this robotic flow that most of us live in most of the time, and pay attention and recognize that we have opportunities to change and to grow. That's hard. That's hard. It's super hard. You ask me what's hard, that's what's hard.
Absolutely. What it brings up for me, John, is this promise to myself that I've made to be kind and non-judgmental of myself. And and others. And it's almost become like a formula, because you could learn all the books and read all the tricks and stuff like that to be
Yeah.
kind and non-judgmental, but still be not kind and judgmental.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so that question, how have I lulled myself into homeostasis, and how can I request to keep myself on the edge of discovery, to
Yeah.
me is a wonderful request that we can make to ourselves to practice connectedness, because connectedness is not static. It is dynamic. It's always evolving.
Yeah. 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 And I would just add, like, a brother concept or sister concept to all of this is just egocentricity, right? Like, when an infant comes into the world, all it knows is it's hungry, it wants to be held. Everything that the infant experiences is about its needs.
Mhm.
And then as the infant grows and over the years, slowly, very slowly, we become gradually aware, oh, there are people around us who have their own needs and feelings. They're not just here to serve me. And I think that's like the essence of maturation, right? This idea that others have needs, desires, and I can help them. I don't have to only be focused on myself.
Beautiful, beautiful. John, this conversation flew by. A 30-second closing reflection. What would you say to somebody who feels just totally overwhelmed and lost in their sea of commitments and promises and requests? Where would you say where to start?
Three things come to mind. Whenever, like, this universe of things to do, if we humans don't put intentionality and deliberate attention, then it's just, we just live in chaos and overwhelm.
Mm.
And so whenever any one of us feels overwhelmed by a multitude of commitments, what we have not done effectively is consider what matters most, and then work back from that. And what matters most typically has sort of two pieces to it. One is my core values, like what do I really care about at the deepest levels, and then in the professional realm, what's the mission? What's the mission we're trying to accomplish? And if you work back from both of those questions, then you can begin to prioritize. Without those two norths, you're just at the whim of everything that blows in front of you. You're at the whim of anything that your manager asks you, or that just sort of floats in front of you. You have to have some way of prioritization. I think those are two vectors that are absolutely vital to do that effectively.
Thank you, John. Deep-seated intentionality and prioritization to help you not fall into overwhelm and just reacting to life.
Yeah.
It's always a joy to speak with you, John. I could speak with you hours.
Likewise.
And thank you for being here today. And John is an executive coach, an amazing executive coach and former CFO of Microsoft North America. We've been talking about managing commitments and digging deep and being intentional and making our requests and promises in a way that creates connectedness. Thank you, John. And everybody listening, we're going to take a short break and we go on to exploration of our next team-defining moment, which will be related to this one, feedback and coaching with Murray Sales. welcome back to Connected Teamwork Summit. We talk about feedback and coaching, and I'm here with Mary Sales. First of all, Mary, I think I said your name totally in a French way. How do I say your name?
You did say it in a little European way, Hilke. It's Murray, but you can say it any which way you like.
It's like it flipped off the tongue that
Yeah,
way.
it actually sounded pretty good. It sounded better than the American way.
I don't know Murray, so we'll stick with Murray. We're going to hear more about Murray in a moment. We're going to talk about this next team-defining moment of feedback and coaching and how we build connectedness in that moment and through that moment. Murray comes to us with decades of experience, 30 years of experience. Actually, has lots of experience in life. 3 children, ages 21 through 28. He lives in Detroit, Michigan, in the suburb. He has 37 years of sales management, and strategic account management experience, and 36 years of that in medical sales. I don't think it's additive. I think that's together. One is part of the other.
That's correct.
Otherwise, my math doesn't work up quite correctly here. He's worked for 3 multinational companies: Xerox, J&J, and now Medtronic. He is a strategic account management guru, I would say, because he's been working in it for 20 years. He's involved in service in many nonprofit boards involving education and other causes. He has a passion for leadership development and encouragement of young leaders. And I love that his favorite virtue is courage. And I got to know Murray in the context of some other podcasts we are doing, and I was just struck by his focus on service and willingness to actually really be there for others. So Murray, welcome.
Thank you, Hilke. It's a pleasure to be with you. It's a great company I'm in with this summit.
Wonderful. Well, it's great that you're here. So Murray, we're going to talk about building connectedness in that pretty, hard moment of giving feedback and coaching others. At least it can be hard. Doesn't have to be, but can be. Tell us a bit about what you can share with us about building connectedness or staying connected in those moments.
Yeah, I think connectedness probably means different things to different people. You hear individuals talk about, I met somebody, or I went on a date or whatever, and we really connected, right? And that can mean we had a lot in common, or we shared the same worldview, or just maybe the personalities meshed, but you feel as though, almost as if you've known this person for some time, right? And I think we all know what that feeling is. And then you look at connectedness relative to organizations. So whether it's a business, that you're a company you're working for or that you're leading, or whether it be a nonprofit organization, I feel connected to that organization. Your prior guest, you were talking a little bit about, am I aligned with the mission, of the organization? Do I believe in what it is that we're trying to achieve? And one of the key things that, in all studies on leadership shows that retention of employees, somebody has to feel connected to that organization. So one of the questions they will ask is, do you have a friend in the organization, that you're working in or that you're volunteering with? And if the answer to that is no, exponentially, the chances are you're going to leave that organization in short order. And then the other piece that we've all read many times is, do you respect, or are you aligned with your manager, or the person you directly report with? And again, if you're not connected in that manner, again, the chances are that it's not going to be a terribly positive experience for you within that organization. So that connectedness, both on a personal level and to an organization, is critical, both for the organization's success and for the individual's success within it.
Yeah, beautifully said. I like that connectedness for the person, with themselves, with each other, and the mission of the organization.
Yes.
That creates that sort of staying power, that engagement power. Power.
And
so
I think we see this more, Hilke, too, with one of the things as the baby boomers in the US here, begin to retire in mass. One of the things companies are struggling with is the younger generations really want that mission base, right? They want something that they can believe in, right? Not just make a paycheck. Whereas people of my age, it was about, look, get a good job and, make some money and do the best you can with it. You wanted to be aligned with the mission, but it wasn't as critical for my generation as it is for this generation. So finding that connectedness is really critical for companies and team leaders that want to keep good employees today.
It's become even more important, is what I'm hearing you say, in light of how the generational orientation is evolving to being much more mission-based. You could say we're slowly walking up to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, from survival to more self-actualization. It's interesting to see how 4 generations from now, where we'll be in that evolution. It's a kind of exciting prospect from that perspective. So tell us about feedback in coaching, Murray. Tell us about maybe an experience you've had with feedback and coaching where, it was very connecting, or maybe it was very disconnecting in the beginning, and how did you move through that? Tell us an experience or a story about that.
Well, I can share an experience. When I was a very young manager, very green, I was with a startup company and got promoted, and we didn't have a lot of policies and procedures in place. And I had hired an individual to do a job, and it was clear about 3 months in that they were struggling. But because I was a young manager, I wanted to, really just kind of give them the rope that they needed, and, not appear burdening and not micromanage. And I probably was too afraid of giving good, direct feedback to that individual. Now, over time, I was able to get there, but it really wasn't until towards the end of their employment, and the employment was terminated. And I must say that's a whole different conversation, right? And that first time as a leader that you have to do that. And if you're a leader of people in business, sooner or later you're probably going to have to do that, and that's a different deal. But you need to own that, right? And I owned that at the time, but I didn't know exactly how to change it. But you have to own that when you let somebody go, you either did not do a good job of matching that individual's skill set, culturally, whatever it is, to your organization. And then you also probably didn't do a very good job of development and of feedback as you went through it. So feedback is so critical. And I will say that the highest performers that I've met crave feedback. It's the people that maybe are middling or lower performers in general. They don't want feedback, or maybe they've had a bad experience, right? And we've all had that, where we had somebody just came and really beat down on us and didn't have a lot of substance to it, or there might have been politics involved, whatever. But feedback is so critically important. We talk about that connectedness. The only way somebody can trust you and believe you care about them is to give them good, solid, actionable feedback. And if somebody's not giving me feedback, it's a lot like Hilke, friends, right? If I'm going down a path and a friend doesn't say to me, hey, you're going down the wrong path, are they really a good friend, right? I mean, you want your friends, and it's the same thing with people that you report to. You want them to maximize your strengths and try to minimize your weaknesses and put you in the best position to be successful. But there has to be trust in order for that to work.
Yeah. So how do you deliver as a good friend and or as a leader that really tough feedback that's good, clear, constructive? How do you do it? And maybe you can give an example. I love the example you gave earlier about being this young manager, like how you might have shied away from it. But I'm curious now, a few decades in, how do you give really tough feedback? And maybe also, what do you find hard as a leader to really do in feedback? And what I'll do is I'll soft pedal, even if I'm very serious about it. Yes, go ahead.
So I think this is where that word courage comes in, right? And so again, to the last part of your conversation with John, the prior guest, he talked about getting outside ourselves. So if you're looking at feedback as something for you and not for the individual you're giving it to, things are going to get really messed up, right? So it's the old saying, I'm sure you've heard, Hilke, that say, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right?
Mhm.
If somebody knows that you're giving feedback because you truly have their best interest in mind and that you want them to grow, the receptivity, right? This is the feedback, like, I don't care what you say. This is the stance of somebody when they say, I trust you, right? I trust you. Tell me. But here's the other thing I'd say, new manager versus what I've learned over time. Feedback has to be regular, right? So many times in companies, we do one annual review and we come in, and especially young managers, and we throw up on an individual. And of course we start with, here's what I like, and then, and I know for me, I'm not even listening to what you're telling me you like, because I'm just waiting for the bomb to drop on the areas that you're going to beat me up on. But if you're having regular feedback conversations, so if you're traveling with somebody, if you're going to meetings with them, if you're seeing things, don't wait for 6 months later. Same thing with a friend, right? If you're only coming to a friend and you're giving feedback after they've made mistake after mistake in the same area for the last year, then they're going to come off a little defensive, like, where were you, right? I know this has been going on for a while. So I think that regular feedback, then essentially what you do is you establish that trust. They know you're going to give them regular feedback. And now you're not just dropping something on them. You're saying, hey, here's something I'm seeing. Here's some ways that we can work on that. Here's some resources for you. And if you're doing that regularly, they're going to be much more receptive to that feedback.
Yeah. I wonder, as you do it regular as opposed to once a year throwing up. So the old way is throwing basically up all over you,
Yes.
right? That's the old way.
Yeah.
Which feels not like an experience that I would want to have as either the recipient or even the giver. Like I would dread it as the giver, right?
Yes.
How would you describe that texture of relatedness that happens when you're doing it regularly? How would you describe the texture of the conversation, the relationship, when you know that, feedback is something that we just do, like having a coffee together?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think first thing is you need to set the expectation with your teams and with the individual. I want to give feedback. Like, I want to give regular feedback for you. And here's another thing, Hilka. I want regular feedback, right? So you need to know that as I give you feedback, if there's something that I could be doing to support you in a better way, in a more complete way, I want you to give me that feedback. And then when it comes, you can't respond defensively, right? You have to take it in. Now, just like when I give feedback, I may not be right on, right? And what I want people that I'm giving feedback to, I need you to say, I agree, or I don't agree, or maybe I agree with part of it and part of it I don't, and then explain that. And so it's very conversational. It's not, hey, Hilka, there are 3 things you need to improve on, X, Y, Z, and you need to get these done in the next 30 days. Any questions? Right? So that's not it. It's like, Hilka, hey, here's what I'm seeing. And I think if you did this kind of this way, I think the results could be much better for you. What do you think about that? Do you agree with that? Disagree with that? And if you agree, then, through this conversation, if there's agreement on it, then we agree, what resources can I get for you? What can we do to then maximize those strengths and kind of catapult you forward? So you have to be willing to get feedback, and then you have to set the culture that feedback is just part of what we do, right? So it's conversational and it's regular.
Feedback is something that we do. It's regular and conversational. It's just part of who we are.
Yes.
And that way, it's also a way to express deep care for each other. Because if we do that from a mindset, every time of wanting to support you, every time we give feedback, it is a demonstration of our care for each other, as opposed to a demonstration of trying to undermine each other. We're going to take a short break in a moment. And in a moment after the break, I'm going to ask you, Mary, about some tough feedback you may have received as a receiver, right? And the process that you had to go through to actually get it, to grok it. As a fellow human being, I can say I have a PhD in defensiveness, and I'm trying to get another one in actually being embracing. that is a little bit more evolved than the first one. So we're going to take a short break now, and after the break, we'll continue our conversation with Murray Sales, senior leader at Medtronic and very experienced leader in building teams and having their best interest at heart. So feedback, Murray, feedback.
Yes.
Feedback. We were talking about feedback, and let's take ourselves into the receiver, put ourselves in the receiver's chair. Tell us about experience you've had receiving feedback, and maybe tough feedback, and how you work with that.
Yeah. So I reported to somebody for the better part of a decade, Hilke, and our personalities could not be more different. I generally am kind of a diplomat. I like to, round the edges, and just kind of a peacemaker type of thing. And this individual, their primary and only way they approach things was confrontational, right? So essentially they want to punch you in the mouth and see how you respond, right? So when I first started working with this individual, being the peacemaker, the diplomat, I was so overwhelmed that what I ended up doing was kind of turtling, right? So just kind of tucked everything in, went about my business. I felt like I was doing everything the right way. And if I just stayed in my shell long enough, he couldn't crack it. And, this thing would go away. Well, of course it didn't. And we had a breakfast one day, and he essentially, and I, just to be clear, I was doing my job. I was meeting the metrics, but I wasn't doing it the way he wanted to do it. And that's a different issue. But his feedback was, look, you're not cutting it. In my mind, you're not cutting it. And if something doesn't change here, I'm going to let you go. And so I left that meeting, and I had a decision to make. So it's kind of fight or flight, right? So do I receive that? First of all, what was given to me that was correct? And this is where, as I went through that introspection over the next couple of days, I realized that I had been turtling, right? And that had made things worse, right? So I was limiting communication rather than expanding communication with him. And that was creating a whole nother sense of, that I wasn't working or whatever it might be. So I had to own the stuff I was doing that wasn't helping the situation. And then I had to understand that I had to modify my communication style to meet the style of this individual. They were not going to change to meet me, for better or for worse, right or wrong. That wasn't going to happen. And so I had to modify my style to become more confrontational. And I don't mean that's just not my nature, but in other words, standing up, saying I don't agree with something, that type of thing. So this feedback was very difficult. And as I said, the key, I think, when you get feedback that's challenging is that you do have to take some time. And it's not always right there when you're with the individual, because sometimes you need some time to process, particularly if it's challenging feedback. Process it and really be honest with yourself. What is it that I need to own here? What's correct that I need to own? And what do I do about it? And then what are the things that I don't think are correct that I can share with this individual? And then what is it that I can do to improve either my performance or the way I interact and operate with this individual? Because sometimes it's not actually about a skill set, although communication is a skill set, but sometimes it's just about that lack of connectedness, right? Which he and I have. And I will say that, again, I worked with this individual for another 8 years. I consider him a friend. He ended up being a big supporter of mine in my career and bringing opportunities for promotion and growth for me. And it was what I would call one of those defining moments in my career. And it came from that breakfast and the feedback. I wouldn't give the feedback or approach things the way he did. Yeah. But if he hadn't done that, my ability to be a little more confrontational, to do things in my own way, gave me more courage. And once I was able to do that I felt like there wasn't an environment I could be in, because this guy had socked me in the mouth so many times and I was still standing. It gave me a great deal of confidence.
I see that transition that you made from turtling. And as you were telling the story, I was thinking, yeah, heck yes. Like with such a quote unquote abusive boss,
Yeah. Yeah.
why wouldn't you? That's like a very smart thing to do. And then you realize through that breakfast conversation, this ain't working.
Yes. Yes.
And this guy is
Yeah.
not going to change. And
Yeah.
I'm going to lose my job
Yeah.
unless I change, because he's not going to.
Yes.
And so to be able to discern the value of the feedback, even if it comes packaged in a way that's antithetical
Yes.
to who we are, I think that's very powerful in a way to build connectedness. I think we all receive feedback in ways from life, from colleagues, from customers, from spouses, from children, that's not exactly coming the way we would say it.
Yes.
Immediately dismiss it. And in that itself is probably our greatest learning, because I'm sensing what you learned was actually to be a little bit more like him
Yes.
in your own way.
Yeah, in my own way. And that's critical, right? I'm not encouraging anybody to take on the personality of somebody just to make a relationship work. If you're changing who you are fundamentally, I'd say no, find another job, find somebody else to report to. But if you can modify your behavior to work within the relationship that you have and still not sacrifice your core of who you are and how you operate, then that's where the introspection comes on. That might be what's required. And I pray for everybody. Again, good feedback doesn't require that, right? Good feedback has trust. It's productive. It's well-meaning. It's you agree upon, you find consensus on what you can do together to grow. That's the best. But as you say, the reality in life is that's not, if we're lucky, that might be 50% of the feedback we get in life.
Yes. If that, then we're lucky.
Yes.
Then we're lucky.
Yes. Yeah.
So what would you say to somebody who is currently resisting feedback? What would you say to them?
Well, I'd use that example I just gave. I mean, the reality is feedback stretches us. Feedback forces us to have that introspection, to do a self-assessment. And for some people, self-assessment, as you know, Hilke, is very difficult, right? I think you guys touched on that in the prior conversation. That, we have blind spots and many times, and that's where this trust comes in, right? You have blind spots. That's where you have friends that you really trust. They're the ones that can speak into that. If I have a close friend or even a colleague at work or a manager that I really trust, and they say something, I'm like, whoa, like, I don't see that. If I take the time to do the introspection, if I trust that individual, I should do that introspection. And if I do it, I guarantee you almost always you're going to find some kernel of truth within the feedback. Because if you trust the person and they have your best interest, they wouldn't bring it forward. Because feedback isn't easy. Nobody wants to just come and give you bad feedback, right? I mean, that's no way to live. They're doing it because they care about you and they want you to grow. So I would just say, be open. Don't put up the defenses right away, right? Take some time to be introspective and then maybe circle back with them and ask some clarifying questions, about the feedback and see if you can't get to the root of the issue.
To take the time to introspect, because defenses are always immediate.
Yes.
That gives us a clue. Like when we're in the immediate defense mode, that's probably not where the learning is.
Yes.
Inserting time, marinating in it, contemplating it, that's where we meet the insight, even if what's said seems absurd to us. What's the kernel of truth in even the absurdity that's being presented to us?
Yeah. And I would also say, Hilke, when you're in the moment of this, whether it's a business review or a personal relationship, try to slow yourself down, take a couple breaths, ask some clarifying questions. Like, well, can you give me an example? What specifically do you mean by that? What has been the impact of that? Things like that. And then don't feel as though, especially if you feel those defenses going up, don't feel as though you have to resolve it right then and there. Ask those clarifying questions. If you're not feeling it, say, I really appreciate it. Can I take a day or two and really think through this? And can we reconnect? And that's always a good place. And anybody that truly cares about you is going to say, absolutely. I look forward to reconnecting and having a discussion.
Beautiful. What would you
And you know,
say?
Hilke, there's one other saying from a great book for any new manager. I read a book. It's called "First Break All the Rules" by Marcus Buckingham, and they've got actual examples of Gallup did surveys of great leaders. I think 10,000 really successful leaders to try and see what do they do well, right? And there's a whole section in there on feedback and what questions you ask. But one of the things they talk about there is, if you're a leader, are you getting work done through people, or are you trying to get people done through work? And when you just say it, it's a subtle difference, but it's a significant difference. Feedback, good, solid feedback. Leaders that give good, solid feedback are trying to get people done through work. And if you're a good leader and you're giving good feedback, the work will get done if you're helping your individual teams and individuals on the team to grow, right? But the goal shouldn't be to give them feedback so you hit a number or hit a goal. The goal should be to improve the performance, to improve the professionalism, whatever it is of that individual. And if you do that collectively for your team and you're constantly raising the skill sets of your team, you will hit the business goals.
Get people done through work.
Yes.
Don't get work done through people.
Yes.
That's something that's going to stay with me, Murray. And
Yeah,
also going from turtle to being able to unwrap the feedback however it is done. However it is done. Final reflection, Murray, for anybody who's hesitating giving feedback today, what would you say to them?
Yeah, if you really want to be a great leader and you want your people to respect you, you must give them feedback. If you want to build a great connected team, and if you want to retain good, high performing individuals, they require that you give them feedback, and you're doing it for them. And that's the other thing I just say, Hilke, is if you want to be a great leader, you need to be a servant leader. And a servant leader is not afraid to give both constructive and difficult feedback.
As a way to be of service.
Yes.
Thank you, Murray. It's been a pleasure sitting with you.
You too.
Your comments are echoing through me. It's like, what is the feedback that somehow I've been resisting because it wasn't packaged in the way that Hilke wanted it to be?
Yes.
That's
for all of us, Hilke. You're not alone.
So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. We've been talking to Murray Sales, senior leader at Medtronic, about feedback and coaching and the power of feedback, how important it is to be able to receive it also when it comes in ways and times and through people that we do not appreciate or like, and see feedback always as a gift given by a generous giver. Thank you so much for listening. We're going to take a half-hour break before, and then after that, we're going to continue with team-defining moment number, my math, I think it's number 9, setbacks and stretches. Setbacks and stretches. We're going to talk to Jen Waltz about how do we help a team stay connected when things go off the rails. Thank you, Murray. Thanks for listening. I'll see you back in half an hour. Welcome back. Welcome back to the Connected Teamwork Summit. My name is Hilke Faber, and I'm here with my next guest, Jen Walls from Krone Technologies. How are you doing, Jen?
Hi, Hilke. It's a pleasure to see you today. Thank you for all of your amazing work in leading this summit, bringing to bear all these amazing voices from all these terrific companies and how we are dealing with connectedness in the moment. I'm great today. I woke up. So everything on top of that is a bonus.
Beautiful. I love your energy and the inspiration and enthusiasm you always bring to any call I've ever been on with you. I really appreciate that, Jen. We're going to talk about this next team-defining moment. Now we're getting into the element of the black belt moment, which are the hardest ones after the white belts and the blue belts. And we're going to talk about setbacks and stretches and how we build connectedness. And before we dive into that, I want to say a few words about Jen. And before I talk about the things about Jen, I want to talk about Jen for a moment. When I think about Jen, I feel taller on the inside. I feel my heart opens, and there's a sense of encouragement that oozes out of any interactions I've ever had with you, Jen. So I don't know exactly how you do that. We're going to go into that in a moment. But it's a person of such strength and courage and deep felt care for everyone around her, which is just a beautiful being to be around and to learn with. So I'm so grateful that you're here, Jen, today. Jen has 2 decades of experience in business development, alliance management, and global partnerships as the vice president now of global alternate channels at Krone, and that's a leading global cybersecurity solution provider. She's responsible for the strategy and execution of building profitable ecosystems that drive scale and growth for the company and its partners. She's passionate about creating the best experiences for partners, for customers, and cross-functional teams through conscious leadership. I read intentional leadership and technology expertise. She has also a lot of other interest where she shares her giving spirit. She's a founding member of N-Formation, which is a community that empowers and connects women of color leaders together. And besides that, Jen, as I said, is an amazing human being. And what better person to walk into this black belt moment of setbacks and scratches with than Jen. So welcome, Jen, again.
Thank you, Hilke. It's a pleasure. Just to introduce myself to everyone, I'm Jen Waltz. And as Hilke said, I have global responsibility for building out our alternate channels for Crone Technologies, a cybersecurity company that's been around for 20 years. And I am helping lead the charge as they grow their North American business market. And so, as I'm responsible for, the overall strategic direction, leadership, execution, and management of our global partner relationships, it's my job and my duty to demonstrate value to all of our partners, helping them scale partner revenue and being accountable for developing and executing against a very strong strategic annual and multi-year revenue target. My role is a key part of Crone's executive team, and it's my role and my duty to contribute significantly to the organizational strategy and external relationships with our partners and those we wish to attract. And so when I think about, I'll talk about my mission statement before we get into connectedness, because there is a direct parallel to it.
Let's do it. Yes.
So my mission in this role is to harness the power of the channel landscape by leveraging a winning global strategy with resellers, referral partners, and distribution partners to help them expedite the time to deliver value from partner lead generation to joint solutioning and achieving market recognition, business growth, and more importantly, trust with, to, and through our partners. And I do this by focusing on relationships in order to become the trusted advisors and the partner of choice in the area of cybersecurity. And I do this, like you mentioned, Hilke, by leveraging my personal integrity, my ethics, and the most important thing is driving a win-win mentality so everyone can succeed. And so to me, connectedness and being in this journey together is all about seeing the wonderful outcomes that come from sharing this moment, whether they're good or bad, and how we rise to the challenge to overcome and become greater than what we were before.
Yeah, what a fantastic context for this conversation. Rising to the challenge. So let's talk about challenge. Let's talk about challenge, right? What happens with Jen, good, bad, ugly in challenge, and how do you lead others through those challenges and still build connectedness? What can you tell us a story?
Yeah, I can actually. I have several. I'd like to think when the universe brings us in to this physical presence and we become who we are as humans, we have a path that the universe has already set us on. And so in my path, I've had personal losses in my life that has propelled me to be the person that I am today. And so I share this with people that I meet. Losses in terms of I was married before, and that marriage ended because my husband died from depression. And that was significant to me. I was in law school at the time, and it was just overwhelming to deal with. And this happened in the midst of my mother having terminal cancer, and I'm having to care for her. And also, I've had loss in terms of the one thing that I've always wanted to do and be is a mother. And I've had, through some accidents, I had a pregnancy that I lost. And so when I think about how I was able to overcome all those personal challenges, even though I've been winning in my professional life, it was important for me to, whenever I speak to someone, to say, I have been there and I can relate to all the challenges you may have had personally. And I think that's one of the things that resonates for me is that I see people. I
Mm.
see people when we are in hurt, when we're in joy, when we're in challenges, and when we just need someone to listen.
Mm.
And so I will share a tidbit with you. My father is like literally one of my heroes outside of the deity that I believe in. And one of the things he shared with me when I was a young girl was, he said, whenever I would come to him with a problem, he would say, "Do you want me to listen or do you want advice?" So think about that for a
Mm.
second. How many parents are mindful enough to say, "I don't want to dictate to you. I want you to come to me with vulnerability and talk to me so we can come to a place of mutual understanding and support that I can give you."
Mm.
So, when I think about setbacks, whether in our personal or our professional lives, these setbacks and obstacles, they're here to stay, right?
Mm.
And I can't say that I'm totally immune to the vagaries of rejection and setbacks, but
Mm.
one of the things that I do with my team is I make sure that we set aside time for disappointment. We
Mm.
talk about things. Now, I do believe in positive psychology, and if you meet anyone that I've met in my entire 40 some odd years in this world, everyone knows I'm super positive.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I don't believe in ignoring reality, right? I
Yes, yes,
acknowledge the fact
yes.
that there is this sinking feeling when negative things occur. And I do feel discouraged and disappointed. But what I have taught myself is to put a very fine timeline in my mind so that I no longer ruminate over that event, right? And that limit is up to us. But I definitely talk to people about making sure that you live in that spirit of setback, but make sure that you don't dwell in it forever.
Mm. So many things you said already there, Jen, about being able to see the other person. Like, I see you and I see you being in the challenge, and I am willing to be there with you. Love the question that your dad asked. Do you want me to listen or do you want to provide advice? And then you saying, don't dwell in the challenge. Make time for it. Don't deny it. And then find another way, find a way through it. So, what I want to know from you, what I want to learn from you about is, since you've had so much experience with loss and setbacks, for example, you started off very vulnerably talking about the passing of your husband to depression, right? You talked about sinking feeling. How do you work with sinking feeling in yourself that in humans tends to accompany things not going well? How do you work with that in a way that helps you to stay connected with yourself and others?
Yeah, I actually, I appreciate you asking that, Helka, because I go back to my mission statement, right? And when you think about what my job is, to drive and focus on relationships, that's what I go back to.
Mm.
The people that I have, you know, met along the way that helps me center myself. Like, what am I doing? Am I doing this for the right reasons? Do they align with my personal North Stars, which are integrity and honesty and being ethical with every person that I meet? I think about what my future is, and that future can be anyone that I'm interacting with. What is our future together in this moment, right? Because it's not just about me. It's
Right.
about us together in this journey. And
Mm.
then I think about, like, how do I stiffen my spine to get the temerity to move past and not dwell, because I do know that there is this beauty in connectedness, because it's like a flower, right? You think about every time you've gone through a setback, what has it taught you? It's taught you something of persevering, resilience, and it's like a seed that you plant
Mm.
because better is coming.
Every setback is a seed that's planted because better is coming. I'm also resonating with you saying, like, your mission of staying in integrity with yourself and staying focused on the relationship and what are we living into? What's the future that we are living into? So sometimes things get really tough.
Mhm.
Relationships end, right? Or you lose people. How do
Yes.
you practice this Jen beingness, this win-win, this positive psychology, this stiffening your spine? So many beautiful things you said in those moments, through those moments.
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that. So, people that know me well, they know that my story, I like to say, goes from cookies to clouds to cybersecurity.
Oh.
And I was a lifelong Girl Scout. And I take that so seriously. Those things about courage and confidence and character to really make people's lives in the world a better place. I know for a fact why the universe brought me here. The universe brought me to this place, gave me life so that I could be a gift to other people. I know that, and I lean into that. And sometimes, Hilke, that upsets other people's demons and the things that go on with them because maybe they're not coming from that place of strength and understanding about themselves. So I really lean into, again, all these things: courage, temerity, strength, because quite frankly, it's in my DNA. I've learned that connectedness is not just about building a network, but it's about nurturing these meaningful relationships. These connections that are my support system during setbacks, because they provide me the strength to persevere. And they're my source of wisdom and energy during these stretches that help me grow and adapt. And as a leader, I've, leaned in and realized that fostering this culture of connectedness within my teams, and not just my teams, but even my friends, and that we're all in this together, and that it's super important for us to be connected for resilience and innovation.
I can see you being very different from being in ego consciousness where you're like one brittle little reed standing in the storm versus this tremendous tapestry that you're nurturing, that is resilient, that you lean into, that you keep weaving, and that is able to hold and work with the challenges as they come in. And you may get stretched, and you may discover new strength in this tapestry because you keep nurturing as opposed to dwelling on this thing that just happened. So it's not the thing, it's the intentionality that you fall into, that you fall back on. You don't fall into things, you fall back into your intentions, is what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Yeah. We're going to take a short break, Jen. After the break, I want to explore more this idea of how do I get to the learning on the other side of a setback, how an upset can become a setup for learning. So how we're going to go through that part of that. We are speaking with Jen Waltz, who is a senior leader at Crone Technologies. And we're talking about how you build connectedness when things don't go well. See you after the break. Yes, so we're talking about these setbacks and stretches, Jen, and how do we get to the learning in those moments? How do we do it?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked me this, Hilka, because getting to connectedness, whether it be your team or your family, number one is you have to be open and honest, right? And that takes vulnerability. Um, it's crucial for maintaining the morale, the resilience, and effective problem solving. Like I said, not just in your teams, but even in your relationship, your marriages, with your children, being open and honest and being vulnerable about your frustrations and addressing others' concerns. Because again, it's not just about you, it's about the other person on the other side of it as well. And then I think about how we get to that point of open and honest communication is by being empathetic. I, as a leader, it is my duty to demonstrate empathy and understanding to all team members, in this environment. I think the beauty of diversity comes from when it's not what you look like, it's not what your sex is, it's not even who you love. It comes from your experiences and the fact of how you dealt with issues in your lifetime, which gives you diversity of thought. And that is where we center around. And then I think about team building. So I'll tell you an example in my previous role. And I know my team probably at first thought it was pretty corny, but I would get together with them and I would hold happy hours. After, like on Thursday, we would get together and we would, hey, bring your favorite beverage. And I know some people were probably uncomfortable with having an alcoholic beverage on camera, but, I would bring my husband on and my husband would sit down and talk to them. So, basically coming from a place of, hey, I'm not just your leader. I'm part of your team and I have the same challenges that you have. So relatability, right?
Yes.
And then I think about, defining roles or responsibilities. How do we address the setback? Making sure everyone knows what their part is in this recovery process. And then fostering collaboration, making sure that people understand the importance of sharing ideas and that no idea is a bad idea. Because you have to start from, okay, how bad could this get? So when you attack a problem, when you say how bad this could be, you're basically solving how to get there, right? How to solve it.
Right.
And then, support, celebrating those small wins just by waking up and showing up and participating and having someone value you. All those things are super important. But even more important, being flexible, adaptable, making sure that people are seen and heard, but even more importantly, maintaining a positive outlook. Now, Hilka, I'll tell you, because I am so positive and I radiate positive, great energy, like I said, some people can't handle that. And to me, when those things, it hurts my feelings. When someone would say, how can this person be so positive? It has to be fake. Someone actually, I heard, called it toxic positivity. Let me talk about that. What human could ever possibly say that another person has toxic positivity when they have lived through struggles? I've lived through a death, several deaths in my life, and chosen to stay positive because it's in my DNA. I'm here because we're resilient. So that's some of the things I wanted to share with you.
Gorgeous. So intentional positivity that's there, that radiates through you, that you take through. And I hear so much in what you're saying, Jen, about how working through setbacks, a big part of this is to stay connected to others and be flexible, adapting. That's how you are together in this challenge and work with it and work through it. Work through it. What would you say to somebody who is in the midst of it? Like it's just hailing and storming and it's shaking, all of it, it's going. What would you say to a person like that who feels maybe a little overwhelmed in the moment?
Oh, that's a great question, Helga. So I like to do post-mortems, pre-mortem, right? So thinking about how did we get here? Usually, number one cause is poor communication. Everyone wasn't on the same page regarding feedback, updates. And I've been in situations like that where I could have brought more people along and I learned a lesson from it in terms of decision making, in terms of hiring team members, making sure people understand the why.
Right.
Then you think about how we got here, lack of trust, misalignment of goals and values. But then, even it could be personality conflicts. It could be the person is overwhelmed. But how you as a leader is what we have to do to help our teams regain connectedness is, again, open and transparent communication, active listening, making sure people feel safe, that they can express their feelings and concern without judgment, right? And understanding as a leader that you fully understand their viewpoints without guesstimating. And then leading by example. I pride myself on being a role model on, hey, making sure that I am collaborating with others. I'm treating them with respect, even when they don't deserve it. And then openly communicating on a regular basis. And then making sure that I'm doing things, understanding my role in where the trust breakdown happened. And admitting any flaws that I had, because we're not perfect humans.
So on that, actually, I want to get to this question before we are out of time, which is, I want to know how you deal with self-judgment. And the reason I'm asking that is because I see judgment as one of the core underminers of positivity and love. So tell me about, how do you work with these persnickety thoughts that I guess you'd be having too?
So first of all, Hilke, I don't worry about what anybody thinks about me because it's not my business.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What is most important is that I am listening. What I do, again, is I come to a conversation from a point of, we're here. How do we overcome this together? If it's a negative situation, let's talk. Maybe there are some factors behind the scene that I'm not aware of that could change or contributed to that situation. But I reflect on it. I first always look internally to say, what did I do to get to that? And I own it, right?
Right.
But I do that because ultimately I want a relationship with this person, right? That's the most important thing. I want a connected relationship with that person.
Great.
We don't have to agree, but I do have to I have to respect them and I have to show value and appreciation. So those are the things that I do, Hilke.
It's seems like all about really keeping relationships in the forefront of your mind,
Yes.
And it's almost as I'm listening to you that there's just no judgment. There's no place for it. There's just no place for it. That's no place for it. We're getting towards the very final minutes of our little time together today, Jen. So my last question to you will be, so what would you say to somebody who finds it really challenging to relate to others when things get tough? They go into their shell or become hard or rigid. What would you say to them?
What's their preferred method of communication? Are they a writer? And so if so, would they feel comfortable writing down all the things that are upsetting them at that moment or putting them in this situation of chaos or misunderstanding?
Yes.
Or do they feel comfortable speaking to someone and having a very candid conversation? And so what I say is always trust your gut, trust your instinct, but always realize none of us are perfect. We are trying to exist in this moment. There's so much going on politically, economically. There's so many fractions right now. But leaning into possibly the person has good motives that they might be having this challenge with, and really talking it out in whatever form they feel comfortable doing so.
I'm going to take that with me, Jen. Leading into the other person has good motives. It's been an absolute delight to speak with you today and to learn more about the intentionality of staying focused and connected to the other. How do you stay connected to the other and keep the heart open to seeing their positive intentionality, even when the things get very, very tough? We've been speaking with Jen Waltz from Krone Technologies about this next team-defining moment of setbacks and stretches and how to stay connected to our positivity, to our integrity, to what's really important to us. Thank you. We're going to take a short break and we'll continue the conversation on the next team-defining moment, which will be about undiscussables and conflict. See you after the break. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you, Hilke.
And welcome back. Connected Teamwork Summit. We're talking about undiscussables and conflict. And I'm here with my friend and a person I admire, Yvonne Higgins-Leach. Yvonne, how are you today?
Good morning. Great to be here.
Great to be with you. I will say a little bit more about you in a second. We're going to talk about how do we build connectedness when we don't agree with each other or when we have stuff to say that's hard to say. We're going to talk about that. I know Yvonne many years now, and actually we were introduced by me asking a question to Leah Zachariah, who is the founder of Hot Yoga Studios and many other things in Seattle and other places. And I asked, I want to talk to a person that you admire. And she said, without hesitation, you got to talk to, I think, my aunt, Yvonne Higgins-Leach. And then I met with Yvonne, and from the very moment I met you, I understood why. There's a radiance about Yvonne, service orientation, and an artistry that just drips off the person. Her primary purpose is to be in life, is to be of service, which she lives very clearly. She is a poet, an animal shelter leader, a board president of an educational nonprofit, and a former communications leader from Boeing for 25 years. You had a whole career there, full career there. In your last role there, she led a team of highly talented PR and communications professionals who managed the international communications plans for lots of airline programs that start with 7, the 777, the 787, the 747, the 767, the 757, and 737. I think I've seen sitting in all these planes amazingly across different sites. Since high school, Yvonne has pursued her love of writing poetry in her second collection of poems called In the Spaces Between Us. Was published this fall by Kelsey Books. She wants to make sense of life's mysteries by telling experiences through the art form of poetry. Love that. Making sense of life's mysteries through the art form of poetry. Focused on service in her life. She raised her children and did it like service there, and then in her job, she is on the board called A Child's Notebook that believes every child deserves a quality education. Involved in Southeast Asia. You went recently to Laos for that. And you also have a passion for working with shelter dogs, where you lead a program that gives them the environment that they deserve.
Mhm.
So much, Yvonne. So much, Yvonne. It's good to see you today.
You too.
Yeah. So let's dive into this topic of undiscussables and conflict. Tell us about an experience you've had with conflict, disagreement, undiscussables, and how you build connection through that.
I'll go back to my time at Boeing, and I was asked to lead a new airplane program from the communications side, which is a real honor because we only bring an airplane to market about every 13 to 15 years. So when they asked me, I'm like, wow, I get this window at a perfect time in my career and my life. And when they're doing this new airplane, there's just like no other kind of opportunity like it. And the journey started out in 2003. It started out in the honeymoon stage where we get to announce the new airplane, we get to describe it, we get to bring all the stakeholders on board. And there's many stakeholders, the customers, suppliers building huge parts of the airplane, employees, media, industry analysts. And when you do communications, though we had primary responsibility for employees and media, we have to integrate all of the audiences, because you could have one message here that conflicts with the message there, and then you've defeated your whole purpose, right?
Mm.
So honeymoon stage was about 4 years, brought everybody on board, all the attributes of the airplane. Everybody's very excited. And 2007 arrived and we had the rollout of the airplane. We did it beautifully. But then after that, we started to have some issues that varied from production, supplier, some technical. And that we knew we'd have some challenges, but we didn't know that they might be in order. So what I mean by that is over the next 2007, 2 years, we had 7 program delays. So here you've got all
2 years.
Yeah. We got all these stakeholders very excited. You're bringing us on the journey. This is going so great. And then it's like, whoa, what is happening? And for example, one delay was 6 months. So from the media standpoint, which was one of our primary stakeholders, we had them on the journey and they were excited. They'd come to Seattle. We'd have summits. We brought a roadshow out internationally. It was multimedia. We told them about every development milestone. And now all of a sudden we're stopped in our tracks. And it was really difficult. It was difficult on every stakeholder. It was difficult on my team, but we knew we had to take the long view and know that that airplane was going to deliver on its promise and that we needed to stay resilient. And Hilka, when it comes to the undiscussables and conflict, we know that it's never an easy ride, right? Life is just not easy. No. And then you throw building a new airplane on top of it. And when we said to ourselves, when there's tension, let's look at that as an opportunity. Let's not bring fear to the table or egos or agendas or your personality issues. Let's look at what the tension is and get curious about it. and have conversations around that so that we can get to the best possible solution. And we went to the table and we did that. And our solution at the time was, let's figure out how we can still be inclusive. We can still help them, the media, feel significant and competent. So when you have a delay and everything stalls, they feel like they can't get their job done. And it was kind of a simple solution. We came up with a global media call. We put one of our expert executives up, did them 3 times to cover all the time zones. And we were vulnerable. You know, we didn't have all the answers. The executives sometimes didn't want to be put in that position. And they did it. And in the end, guess what? The media felt included. They felt we were treating them like they were significant and they still mattered. And then they could be competent and go do their job. So we connected, we brought them back in and brought them on the journey, even though the journey got difficult.
So much a story of going from conflict to more confluence, where things are coming together as opposed to knocking in each other. Where I'm curious is what your process was in this, because here you are, Yvonne, leading a lot of this, or co-leading a lot of this. And so there's this launch delay. There's 7 delays in 2 years. And one of them is 6 months. What was going on inside of you at first?
Great question. You have to, well, for me personally, I made sure that before I started my day, I found at least 5 to 10 minutes of quiet time. And I absolutely had to have that. And we were very early. Boeing it's manufacturing. We're up early. And for 2 years, we had a 6:30 in-person meeting in our offices. And so I just set my alarm and I made sure that I had those, okay, the day is going to begin. It's going to present a lot of challenges, but you have placed me where I need to be. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. And so please just give me the resilience and the strength to be of service to my team and to the bigger objective of delivering this airplane.
So taking the time to connect to a higher power before going into the actual conflict, right? Into the actual challenge. So describe a little bit, if you are willing to, what that process for you has been and maybe still is. What happens for you when you enter into that space of conscious connection with higher intelligence? What happens?
I think you really come from another place, which is, I think it's kind of what Jen said. It's you come from a place of it's not about you, and you first go to the other. So one of the things I would say to myself is, it's be other focused today. Don't come from what's all going on in here and your own stuff. Be other focused. And that really helps. It's that service mentality of what can I do for that person in this moment that gets us to the goal.
That taking myself out of the gobbledygook of the insides of me, which also need attention. And it seems like you were tending to that, and then allowing yourself to get into the perspective of the others. Take yourself out of in the perspective of other, and how to be of service to that. And how did that guide then what you did?
You know, I think that's it guides you in the sense of trust. And at the same time, you can't just put your whole self aside. You have to know that you are in a leadership position. And I think our responsibility there is to provide the structure and the process So there's accountability. So if I can continue to tell the story, because this was a 10-year story.
Yes, yes, by all
So
means.
now we get past those 7 delays and by golly, we get that airplane in the air. So we had first flight, we got an entry into service. Guess what? We delivered the airplane to customers. And 2 years in, we have about 5 airlines operating the airplane, and we have a battery issue. And lithium ion batteries were kind of a new technology, and they started on fire in the airplanes. And we ended up grounding the 787 fleet. And the FAA did it, and then the European agencies followed, and the Asian agencies followed. And it was the first time a single aircraft fleet was grounded since 1979. And it was grounded for 3 months while we found a technical solution. And at that point, it was like, okay, this is really huge, and we need an operations center, and we need to gather every day, and we need our objective and goal up on the wall, and we need a place for each stakeholder who's responsible. So our customers, our supplier people, our industry people, our social media people, our media people. And we set up a process that was reliable, repeatable, and had clear roles and responsibilities. So again, I'll go back to everyone who had a stakeholder felt included, significant, and competent in doing their job and meeting the needs of their stakeholder groups. That was one of the best things we ever did, because people could trust a process and they knew where they fit in.
And we're going to take a break in a second. I want to explore more after the break about how do you create inclusion in conflict, right? And at the same time make progress, because I can imagine getting lost in the inclusion while the time's ticking. These 787s are grounded for 3 months. So like that. So let's explore that after the break. How do we integrate being inclusive with being decisive and making progress? See you after the break. Talking with Yvonne Higgins-Leach, currently poet, shelter, leader, board person, all kinds of things, and a former communications leader from Boeing. And we're talking about this story of how do you manage conflict, undiscussables when things are very high stakes, like an airplane is grounded for months internationally because the lithium batteries are overheating. So tell us what happens next, and how do you balance inclusiveness with decisiveness?
Again, I go back to process, because every day at 3 o'clock, we gathered in that room and we knew who had what role and what they were accountable for. So once you set that up, there's trust built in the room and understanding. So every day, a person was a lead for each stakeholder, and they would get up and they would brief us on what steps are taking, what tools are in development, and what's next for the next day or week. And you know what? Differences came up. People would say, wait a minute, you can't tell the supplier that first, because if you tell them, then the customers will hear without them hearing from the salespeople. So it was a safe environment, but those undiscussables were allowed to come forward because everybody had time and space in that room to tell what action they were taking. And then people could say, wait, let's put on the brakes for a minute and talk about this. And so we weren't afraid of that. We wanted to We wanted those opportunities to come up because then we could make sure that if we needed to rejigger something, we did it.
Hmm.
And we didn't have negative consequences by having those discussions early and at that point in time.
How do you create a context where people actually are willing to share? Because yes, you have process, yes, you have clear roles and responsibilities, and yet I can imagine all kinds of personal agendas rotating around and pressure on people to deliver and say the right thing. And how do you create a context where actually people are sharing what they need to share?
You know, we started every meeting by reviewing our purpose statement. And I really think that connected people back in, like, yes, I am representing my stakeholder and that this is important. This is my job. But the purpose statement, you have to remind everybody every day you're part of something bigger. And don't forget that, because then they kind of do put the agendas aside or their fears aside or whatever they're bringing in personally.
This is the recurring theme that I've heard in this conference, that when we connect ourselves to something bigger, Matt Oppenheimer from Remitly talked about this yesterday, then that opens the space to authenticity. And I hear you say that again today, that when we connect ourselves to something bigger, it helps people to set aside the personal agendas and be willing to actually talk about the stuff that needs to be talked about, because people realize it's not about mini me. It's about a much bigger purpose.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's
I can
great.
see why that's a theme.
Yeah. Say more about that.
I think when you see it, it resonates. Like, it is what gets you from being part of something that's heavy and burdened, and you don't feel productive and you don't feel that connection. And when you see it and feel it, you know it's working. Like, we look forward to those 3:30 meetings. We couldn't wait to get in there and have these discussions and, you know, make sure we were all on the same page. It's just that great teamwork vibe that you get, where you know you're achieving something bigger than yourself or your stakeholder group.
Yes, and the undiscussables, it actually is an ingredient, like just like flour, sugar, milk is for pancakes. To build this purpose, I have to throw it in. I have to say this because it's actually grist for our building our relationship and moving towards our purpose, the realization of our purpose.
Very
To
much
me,
so.
that's so like antithetical to how the ego mind works. Like, I'm not going to say this because it's not going to work out so well for me.
Yeah. You know, there's one other thing that comes to mind as you're speaking. When we had each stakeholder group get up and talk, they did something called an assumptions chart. And the assumptions chart really drove out a lot of undiscussables. So I'll just give you maybe a quick example. When we did our media assumptions, we would say things like, the media will come along with us if we give them the right channels. We have really talented executives who can speak to the media. And our assumptions needed to be checked, because if an executive came to our meeting, they go, well, you think we're all talented, but you know what? If you're going to put me up on a call, I need training. So he was able to say, or she was able to say, I'm vulnerable. If you're going to use me in that call, I need training. And that was not discussed until we put up our assumptions.
What a beautiful process. We put up our assumptions, and then assumptions create a basis from which to have discussions of truth. Is this true?
Exactly. That's exactly what it did.
Is that true? Is that true? And that gives people the space to say, well, maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe and if it's not true, that may then lead to an action to do something about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It was really a good process. Good tool.
Good tool. Was there more in this story that you want to share? Because it sounds like such an amazing story. I'm sitting on the tip of my chair.
Yeah, it was.
About this.
It was kind of crazy to find yourself there. I guess the other thing I'd like to mention is you can spend a lot of time planning And then you have to know that you've got to move forward to the doing. But then there's the checking. So it was a tool that we used at Boeing. It was called Plan, Do, Check, Act. And so many times when you're in the middle of something that intense, you forget to check. And we made sure we took the time to step back and check. So check in with the media. How are they doing? Check in with employees. Are the messages resonating? Are the tools working? And it's very hard for teams to spend time checking because it takes resources and time. But what an essential step. We really realigned at times based on doing a thorough check.
Please do, check, act.
Plan, do, check, act.
Plan, do, check, act. Plan, do, check, act. Beautiful. What would you say to somebody who is in the midst of it? Like where the undiscussables are subterranean and they've been there for a while. And there may be hesitation to talk about it. What would you say to a person like that?
You know, it sounds like it's a little, I don't know, elementary, but this was a tool I used. If it was a one-on-one with a person and I wasn't feeling like there was that connection, or if we were in the team setting and I wasn't getting that sense of, I don't feel the good vibe today. I asked the question, what else? That's all I said is, what else? And I could not believe how many doors opened with that question, because we could have finished the meeting. The person could have walked out of the room. But when I asked what else, you cannot believe what came up. The other stuff came up. Well, they felt an opening.
That sounds like a poem to me. What else?
Yeah, I might use that.
What else? What a powerful question. What else as a way to open the door to what needs to be said? And what else is a way to be courageous, both to talk about what needs to be talked about, right? What needs to be talked about. What happened within yourself, Yvonne, as you asked that question? When you asked that question, how did that feel in you?
Oh, that's such a great question, because you're vulnerable in asking the question, because you don't know what's going to come. You're getting a sense of something, and then you have to be open to, okay, wow, there was something else there. And to me, I went back to my morning. I'm other focused. I'm of service to this person today. This is why I'm here now. And it goes back to the what else question. You're other focused.
Other focused. What a great way to practice compassion. What a great way to practice compassion. I'm sitting with that and reflecting on the power of that question in my own life. Last question. What would you say to somebody who thinks, well, I don't have time to ask that question. I've got to move on.
It never disappointed me when I asked that question. Something deeper happened every time I asked it. And it's important to practice your own vulnerability day in and day out. And just be brave. Ask the question. And things will move on better and more productively after that conversation happens.
What else? Almost sounds like a prayer. Tell me. I'm here. Like it's opening yourself to the unknown where all the richness is. Beautiful, beautiful. So as you're in this stage of life, how do you practice with this what else question for yourself?
I practice it in now the other things I'm doing. I practice it in my poetry. What else is there? What have I been living with? What's been stirring in there? What else is going on that makes me want to create a poem? I don't want to create a poem about something that's not meaningful. So I do ask that question. And in working with the dogs and the program, what else can we do to help the volunteers feel involved and included and competent? It applies really to everything that I'm doing now. And with the nonprofit, it's just a real, it's a really good way to go deeper so that you're getting to the best possible solutions for everybody involved.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. It's been a deep pleasure to sit in the exploration of what else. I see it as such a beautiful way to go from conflict to confluence, to work and find a way to include all these different perspectives in a great way to allow for relationships to flow. So thank you so much, Yvonne. Yvonne, is there anything else you'd like to say by way of closing?
Oh, it's just been so wonderful to be part of this summit, and what fantastic people, and the work that you're doing just couldn't be more timely. Thank you for including me.
Great. I'm going to practice this question, what else? During election season, when I talk to somebody who I know voted for the other party.
That's a
and
good
see
one.
What will happen in our conversation. That is my commitment. You're listening. I appreciate you listening and participating in this summit. We've been talking to Yvonne Higgins-Leach, who is a poet, an animal shelter caregiver, board member, and so many other things, and a teacher of life, of many things, including this beautiful question, what else? To unearth that what needs to come from under the surface to the space of the heart. So thank you so much, everyone, for listening. We're going to take a short break right now of about half an hour before we look at the two final theme-defining moments that we're going to discuss in this conference, hurt and departures. See you in about 30 minutes. you.